Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everybody hear me? Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody hear me?
السلام ورحمة الله.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. Thank you so much for joining us for the virtual visit, the virtual ziyarah, and for the class, inshallah ta'ala. My name is Ustadh Habibur-Rasul Miller, and we are studying fiqh according to the madhab of Imam Malik, rahmatullahi, the Maliki madhab. I am teaching from a collection of rulings compiled by my teacher, Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal, who studied this information with the renowned scholar of not only Maliki Fiqh, but also Aqidah and Islamic philosophy, Dr. Suleiman Dunya, rahmatullahi alayhi. And we are almost at the end of the book. I think we have a couple of new folks, so if people have questions and would like more discussion about what it is that we're teaching, what this information comes from, please feel free to ask those questions at the end of class. I'll make sure to leave some time for Q&A, and we're also going to go over that more thoroughly. We did it last week, but we'll do it again, inshallah, once we begin a new cycle of the book. Please forgive me if you hear some background noise. I got my kids, school is still out, so the kids are in the house. So you'll hear them in the background, alhamdulillah. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to jump into the book because I want us to try to get through the text so that we can begin a new cycle, inshallah ta'ala, very soon. As always, we open with dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الأقبلق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدر العظيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وذرياته وأهل البيت كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير أسألك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسير الجال من عذاب النار وسوء المصير اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد رضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا همة الشيخ اهدرنا بها المحضر ولتعتفي بنظرة تأتينا بظفر عما بعد الحمد لله رب العالمين. Oh, mashallah, brother Nick is just joining at the right time. Assalamu alaikum, brother Nick. Welcome. Alhamdulillah. So good to see you in the chat. Alhamdulillah. Welcome, brother Nick. May Allah reward you. So we're just starting. We just made a dua, and we're just gonna jump into it, inshallah ta'ala. We are continuing from our lesson on. We've essentially more or less completed the lesson on sujood saw, on the prostrations of forgetfulness, and now we are talking about some specific cases regarding the sujood saw as it relates to joining a prayer that's already in progress. So this is really a continuation of the lesson of sujood saw, but it has some other information contained within it, inshallah, connected to it. In any case, Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So last week we ended off by discussing what you should do if you join the prayer late, right? If the imam is praying and leading people in prayer, and you join the prayer after the prayer has begun and the imam makes sujood sahu, right? The imam may be making sujood sahu for something that happened before you joined the prayer, right? And we talked about how to do that, and we recorded that class, so I'll send a link out to the group for people to watch that and refresh in case they missed it. But inshallah ta'ala, I will mention, I think we just lost somebody, maybe Brother Nick, but I will mention just a little bit in the way of a recap. I just sort of quickly read the first points that we went through without a lot of explanation. And if it's unclear, inshallah, please look at the video that we will post in the group. Also, if anybody here is not in the WhatsApp group that we use to keep people informed about the classes, whether it's a change in the time or if the class is canceled for the week. If anybody's not in that WhatsApp group, please shoot me a message. You can send me a message in the chat here on Zoom, or you can send me a text separately just to let me know, hey, I'm not on the text message thread. Can you please, or I'm not in the WhatsApp group. Can you please add me? The name of the group is, I think I just call it Maliki Fiqh Class Welcome. Right. So if you're not in that group, if you're not in a group where you get regular updates from me about the class, shoot me your number, inshallah. You can do it as a private chat if you don't want others to see, or you can send me a text and I will make sure to add you. And I'll put my number in the chat just in case you need it. That's me. So inshallah ta'ala, you can send me a text and I'll add your number to the group, inshallah ta'ala. And that's for everybody. Bismillah. So we mentioned that the salams that in the prayer separate the imam from the ma'moon. They separate the imam. They separate the imam from the one who is following the imam in prayer. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Welcome, uncle. Welcome. Alhamdulillah. So we said the salams separate the imam. Oh, alhamdulillah. Got your text message. But yes, the salams separate the imam from prayer, meaning you're following the imam until the imam says salam. Then after that, the link between you and the imam with regard to the prayer is finished. He can leave, you can leave. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. I had to respond to an important text. So yes, so the salams is what separates the imam from the ma'moon. I'm going to rein myself in and not give you a long explanation and actually force myself to do what I said and just kind of go through it quickly. The second thing we mentioned is that if the imam must do sujood saw, right, meaning the two sajdas, the sajdatain, the two prostrations that we do at the end of a prayer to account for mistakes that we made if we added something to the prayer or omitted something essential from the prayer, right? And just to be clear, we don't do that after every prayer. We just do that when we have to because we made certain mistakes. So the imam, if the imam has made one of those mistakes where he needs to make sujood saw at the end of the prayer, if he had to do it before salams, right, for something that happened before the ma'moon joined the salat, then the ma'moom must do it with the imam. And of course, we make sujood saw before salams if we've omitted one of the major sunnahs from the prayer, and we make sujood saw after salam if we've added anything to the prayer. So if you have to make sujood saw before salams as the imam, the ma'moon makes it along with the imam, right? Because the imam makes those two sajdas before he salams. And the salam is what separates the imam from the ma'moon. And in case I didn't say it, ma'moon is the one who follows the imam in the prayer. The third point is if you know that the imam should have done sujood saw before salams, but forgot to, and is now doing it after salams, right? This is something, if you forget to make sujood saw before salams and you remember, then you can make it after salams and it's okay. If in that situation, then the ma'moon does not say assalamu alaikum. They wait to see if the imam is going to make sujood saw after he salams out. And if after he salams out, he makes sujood saw, then the follower makes sujood saw with the imam. and then salams out of the prayer. This is when the follower knows that the sujood saw is for something. It really should have been made before salams, but the imam forgot and made it after salams. Also, if the imam is following a different madhab, he may make sujood saw after salams, and you can follow him. But you knowing that it should have come before salams, you wait and you make the sujood saw, and when he salams out, then you finish your prayer, right? Because this is for the person who comes to the prayer after the imam has already started it, right? I hope I'm not going too fast. If I am, let me know. The fourth point we said is if the imam says sujood saw after salams, even if it's for something from before the ma'moon joined the salat, the ma'moon says his sujood saw or her sujood saw afterwards, or after he or she completes the rakat that they missed and after the salam of the prayer. What does that mean? I'm going to explain this one a little bit more because it might be confusing. If you join the prayer late, the imam has already made a rakat, right? You don't know if the imam has made any mistakes before you came to the prayer. And you don't see any indication that he's made any mistakes in the prayer, right? You don't see him add a rakat. You don't see him add anything, or omit anything that would, well, in this case, add something. You don't see him add anything that would require him to make sujood saw after salams, right? But you notice he makes sujood saw after salams, right? What do? You don't follow the imam, even if you do know why he's making sujood saw after salams. You do know the mistake he made, regardless whether you know what mistake he made or not. Whether the mistake was a mistake he made before you joined the prayer or after you joined the prayer. If he makes sujood saw after salams for adding something to the prayer, right, then you don't make the sujood with him. He salams out of the prayer, you stand up, make the rakat you missed, or if it's 2 rakats or 3 rakats, however many rakats that you missed. And then after you finish your prayer, you say salam, and then you make the sujood saw after salams, right? I'm gonna let that breathe for a second and ask if anybody has any burning questions that you need clarified before we can move on. Sorry. Okay, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum. You can still hear me? Let me just get a check to make sure everybody's still able to hear.
Yes, we can hear.
Alhamdulillah.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Please forgive me because this is my first time joining this class. If it's something sometimes I see people and they're praying a fard prayer. I still need to pray that fard prayer, and they're already sitting down and like in tashahhud, and they might have even said tashahhud. Maybe they're saying some dua after tashahhud.
Mm-hmm.
Can I still sit and join them and then basically pray 4 rakat or however many, the full prayer essentially, because I missed that one, but just for the benefit of having joined them in Jama'ah?
That's actually a great question. And by the way, welcome, Brother Nathan. There's another brother who sometimes joins via Zoom with the name Nathan. So I wasn't sure if you were him or if you were someone new, but alhamdulillah, welcome. Alhamdulillah, really glad to have you. What city do you live in, by the way, if I can ask?
I'm very close to DC, but I'm in Northern Virginia.
Okay. Oh, did we meet when Sheikh Mahdi was here?
Yep, absolutely.
Mashallah. Okay, excellent. I'm so glad you're in class, and please feel free to call. I think you texted me and said you had some questions, correct?
Yep. Yes, I did.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Let's. I think I called you back much later after you texted me, and you might not have known it was my number. But let's connect. Alhamdulillah. But to answer your question, did I cut you off?
Oh no, you didn't. Sorry, I think there's a lag.
Okay, no problem. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala sayyidina Muhammad. So to answer your question, if you see the Jama'ah sitting, at the end of the prayer, and you know that, they're at the end of the prayer, right? I mean, sometimes you see people sitting in Jama'ah and you don't know, maybe they're on the second rak'ah of a 4 rak'ah prayer, right? And so you join because you want to get the whole prayer. But even if you know that they're at the end of the prayer, yes, you can join. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. You can, alhamdulillah, you can join them for that barakah, and it's actually good adab to join them. Let's say, for instance, you particularly if you come into the masjid or you come into any place where people are praying in jama'ah, this is the main jama'ah, right? And you see there at the end of the prayer, it's good for you to join the prayer, sit with them, right? Out of adab for respecting the jama'ah, respecting the imam, respecting the prayer. But we won't say that you caught the prayer in congregation. We won't say that you caught the prayer in congregation. In order to catch the prayer in congregation, you need to join the congregation uh, before or while the imam is in the ruku' of the final rak'ah. So if the imam is praying dhuhr, when they get to the last rak'ah of dhuhr, when the imam goes into ruku', when he bows, when he puts his hands on his knees and bends over and bowing, if you can get into that position before the imam stands up and says Sami Allahu liman hamida, then you can count yourself as having caught the prayer in Jama'ah. Anytime after that, you have not caught the prayer in Jama'ah. But you still can join and should join out of etiquette. And then when the imam salams out, you stand up and you make your complete prayer, right? You don't have to call a new aqama or anything like that, right? But technically, you haven't caught the Jama'ah, right? You're praying on your own. Into the masjid or in your home and you see someone praying and it's not a Jama'ah. Maybe you're in the masjid and you know the time for Maghrib was 45 minutes ago. So you know they already prayed Maghrib and Jama'ah. But you see some brothers, or sisters, in Maliki method, it would be brothers, right? If you see some brothers who are praying in Jama'ah, right? And you know that, okay, they're praying Maghrib because Isha is not in, so I know they're praying Maghrib and I need to pray Maghrib, right? In that situation, some of the scholars would say it's better that you just pray by yourself, right? Some of the scholars would say that it's better that you pray by yourself. But if you were to join them, there's no harm in it, right? If you were to join them, there's no harm in it. But certainly if you come and you see the people making the main jama'ah of that prayer, then you should join them just out of adab and for the barakah of catching, so to speak, for lack of a better word, the end of the prayer. But you wouldn't say that you've caught the prayer in jama'ah. You don't get the credit for praying the prayer in jama'ah. Perhaps Allah may give you the credit because of the fact that you made the intention to pray in jama'ah. Allahu alam, Allah is generous. But according to the fiqh, according to the legal, rulings, you would not have caught the jama'ah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for answering it. And I guess I have one follow-up.
Please.
Let's say you sit down, whether or not you realize, they were doing the final tashahhud, and the imam says taslim, when you stand up, I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but are you basically starting a new prayer, or are you praying the four as if, like, for example, is that Allahu Akbar, like the tahrim Allahu Akbar, or is
haram? Yeah.
Or haram? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Takbir, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm like blanking out on terminology, but basically, is that the opening Allahu Akbar for you, and it's as if you're completely starting over, or is it kind of like you still pray as if you're making up for with them? You know what I mean?
I get your question. And I don't know. I don't have a straightforward answer to you as to whether or not we would call that takbiratul ihram. You are starting a new prayer. So I'm inclined to say yes, but I haven't asked that question specifically, and I haven't come across that specific answer in the books. The reason I'm saying it's a bit ambiguous and why it's a good question is because when you join the prayer out of etiquette, even if they're at the end of the prayer, you're going to say Allahu Akbar, and that functions as the takbiratul ihram. So I don't know. I don't know. Alhamdulillah, I don't mind telling you when I don't really know the answer to your question. I don't want to start making stuff up. But what I can say is that what you should do in that situation is make Allahu Akbar, which will be like your takbiratul ihram, to enter into the prayer, and then when you finish, when the imam salams out, you stand up and you're going to begin your prayer anew. I see Sidi Umar Abdullah mentioned that Sheikh Amin said yes. If you are, oh subhanallah, I'm sorry. Walaikum salam, he said that as a direct message, probably out of trying to be nice to me. But I don't mind, if people who had a chance to study with Sheikh Amin also add on. So please, if you care to elaborate, if you could elaborate a little bit, please do.
Now you gotta explain, honey.
Hello?
Yes, Sidi Omar.
Oh, subhanAllah. Assalamu alaikum.
That mashallah. I didn't know which Umar that was.
How you doing?
I'm good, mashallah. It's great to hear your voice, Sidi.
Alhamdulillah. Same.
Alhamdulillah.
Now I remember sitting with Sheikh Amin, and that same question was asked, and he said, yes, it's good. It's like good adapt, because you're starting kind of like your own prayer now. I don't want to get into details, but I remember him saying that. So that's something that I've added to what I do when I come late to Salah.
Alhamdulillah. He said that when you stand up to make your prayer, that's takbiratul ihram.
I don't remember him calling it that name, but he said, yes, you should say Allahu Akbar.
Right. Alhamdulillah. That's what I remember as well. Alhamdulillah. But jazakumullah khair, and there's a couple of people, alhamdulillah, who are in the class now. I won't put you all on blast in case you don't want to be, but there's a couple of
I wasn't ready for this.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. There's a couple of brothers, and Sidi Omar is my brother who we was soldiering together, studying with Sheikh Amin and studying in synagogue together. But some of my uncles are here as well who studied with Sheikh Amin even before I came to Sheikh Amin. So if ever there's anything that you hear that a correction to something I've said or an elaboration or anything you can add, please don't hesitate. I welcome that. It helps me, But yeah, what Sidi Umar said is what I remember as well. The Sheikh Amin said in those situations, you say Allahu Akbar, and then you sit down, right, with the Imam, and then, or if the Imam's in Sajda, you go into Sajda or whatever the Imam is doing, and then after the Imam salams out, you stand up, you say Allahu Akbar again, and you complete your prayer as if you had just started your prayer from the beginning. But I don't remember if he said that the first takbir is called takbiratul ihram in this case, or the takbir you make after the Imam salams out is takbiratul ihram. So I don't want to mislabel it, right? But inshallah, we can get an answer to that question. But hopefully that at least gives you some clarity on what to do, inshallah, in that situation.
Everyone, thank you.
Alhamdulillah, thank you. Jazakallah khair. I love questions, man. I love good questions. Alhamdulillah. Sister Zainab, salam alaikum. I see you have your hand up.
Walaikum assalam. I have two questions. The first question is when you said when the Imam salams out, you stand up. So you don't salams out either. You just directly stand up. And
exactly. If you're praying behind the Imam and the Imam salams out of the prayer and you have to make up what you missed before you join the prayer, you don't salam with the Imam. You stand up and then you complete your prayer and you salam it at the end. If you salam out of forgetfulness, if the Imam says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and you just forgetfully say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and then realize, oh, I was supposed to stand up and finish the rest of my prayer, there's no problem. That's no problem. You're forgiven for that. But you shouldn't do it intentionally, right? When the Imam salams out, you don't salam out until you finished your prayer.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, when you said when you join a prayer in congregation and the Imam is on the fourth rakat, getting ready to bow, that's still considered like, hey, you made prayer in congregation. Does that apply to, let's say, if you're praying in congregation for Fajr or for your Jumat prayer on Friday, like on the second rakat, if you make it?
Right. For Fajr, yeah. Well, yes, for both. For both. Okay. If you catch the prayer with the Imam before he stands up and says Sami Allahu liman hamida, if you're able to put your hands on your knees and go into the ruku, go into the bowing position correctly, before you hear him say Sami Allahu liman hamida, then you've caught that prayer. As long as you do it before, as long as you catch that part of the final rak'ah, right? If you catch that part of, say, the second rak'ah of Dhuhr, right? then you can say that you've caught the second and the third and the fourth rakat, but you'd have to make up the first rakat. If you catch the prayer before that part, that's the cutoff part. So if you catch the prayer before that part, you can consider that you've caught that rakat of the prayer, right? Now, Jumu'ah,
okay.
Yeah. So for instance, if you are joining Maghrib prayer and the Imam already made the first rakat, now he's in the second rakat and he's in the ruku, and you come to the prayer, you say Allahu Akbar, and you put your hands on your knees and bow to ruku, and then you hear him say Sami Allahu liman hamidah, then you've caught that second rakat. You only would have to make up the first rakat of the prayer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. For Jumu'ah, there is a little bit of I guess conversation in terms of the fact that Jumu'ah you want to catch all of it, right? You want to be counted as the person who caught all of the Jumu'ah. There's a hadith where Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, welcome Brother Mustafa. There's a hadith that says when the people come to Jumu'ah, the angels are writing the names of the people who come to Jumu'ah until they hear the adhan for Jumu'ah, the second adhan, the final adhan, and then they close their book and they sit and listen to the khutbah too, right? Some of the scholars say that the khutbah takes like the place of the first two rak'ah. It's like normally you make salatul dhuhr, you have 4 rak'ah. So we have the first 2 is covered by listening to the khutbah, and the second 2 is covered by the salah, right? However, the scholars say if you catch the prayer, right? The scholars I'm familiar with, I don't know if there's other opinions about this, but if you catch the prayer, even if you just catch that second rak'ah, then you can consider that you've made the Jumu'ah, right? You don't have to make anything up. You make up the rakat that you missed at the end of the prayer, and you salam out, and you've made the Jumu'ah, right? You've caught the Jumu'ah, right? But when we find ourselves in that position, we should push ourselves, inshallah, in the future to try to get there a little bit early. And I'm guilty of that. I'm not always great with time, so I'm not telling you all to do something that I'm not telling myself to do first, right? But alhamdulillah, you've caught the prayer in that situation. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions, or can we move on, inshallah? Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad. Oh, Sister Sayyidah Fatima said, please repeat that. So when you come to the Jumu'ah late, if you are able to catch the ruku' of the second rakat, meaning you're able to catch the bowing of the second rakat, you're able to put your hands on your knees and bow before the Imam says Sami Allahu liman hamidah, right? That's the cutoff point. So if you catch the second rakah of Salatul Jumu'ah, which means you join the prayer before the Imam says Sami Allahu liman hamidah in the second rakah, then you can consider that you've made the Jumu'ah, meaning you don't have to make it up. You don't have to, you simply make the rakat that you missed. You complete that second rakat with the Imam. You make up the first rakat that you missed because you came to the prayer late. And at the end, you make salam, and you don't have to do anything to make that up, right? But because the Prophet ﷺ has informed us that, truly catching the Jumu'ah entails listening to the khutbah, coming to the masjid, getting there, while or before the second adhan is called, listening to the khutbah, making your 2 rak'ah, right, with the Imam. Because of that, we if we find ourselves making it to the prayer late and just barely catching the salah, we should push ourselves to make sure that we do a better job in the following weeks, inshallah, to get there on time. And like I said, I myself, am even guilty of coming to the prayer late sometimes, while the khutbah is going on. So, but was that the part that you missed, Sayyidah Fatima? If you need me to repeat that again, or you missed anything, please let me know, inshallah ta'ala. But in the meantime, Brother Nathan, I see you have your hand up.
Assalamu alaikum. I have sorry for these I don't know what to call it, like trick questions, but tricky situations. Mm-hmm. Basically, I've heard that if you miss a rak'ah that's, like, for example, out loud, then when you make it up, you do it out loud. Yes. And then if you make up a rak'ah that's silent, you do that silently. So does that just to make sure that the Jumu'ah let's say I came in on the second rak'ah, I'm able to get in before the ruku'ah. When I, after this taslim and I come back up for making up the first one, should I also do that part out loud?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding is yes, you make that out loud.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Wa iyaka, alhamdulillah. I'm gonna move on because I want to get through this section, but I still leave some time for a few more questions, inshallah, at the end. And if you need to ask a clarifying question about something I say, then stop me so you can ask, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm the Zoom, now I'm seeing myself, so I see I didn't comb my beard today, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he used to make it a point to keep his beard well groomed. So I don't want you to see this and take my take my bad habit. Inshallah ta'ala, is good that we stay groomed. Say that Aisha, radiallahu anha, our mother, she commented on the fact that the Prophet ﷺ always kept his beard well groomed. So inshallah, we do a better job of that next week. Tayyib, bismillah. So the fifth point in this section: if the imam forgets a fard in the last rak'ah, right? This is new information. We didn't mention this last week. If the imam forgets a fard in the last rak'ah, like the second sujood in the third rak'ah of Maghrib, right? Or the second sujood in the fourth rak'ah of Dhuhr, right? He forgets a fard in the last rak'ah of a prayer, right? Alhamdulillah. And the ma'moon, the follower in the prayer, came to the prayer late in the third rak'ah of Maghrib, and the imam remembers immediately after he says salam and does jalsa and then sujood and then the tashahhud and then the follower must do all these things with the imam, because the first salam was invalid, but the follower does not do the sujood salah after salams or the salams with the imam, but waits until he has completed the rakats he missed and says it after the salam of salat. This is alhamdulillah. Thank you, Sayyida Asma, for making the excuse for me. Alhamdulillah. But this point here is kind of an intricate point. And we find this a lot in our lessons, because Dr. Dunya Rahmatullahi, being the kind of teacher he was, and Sheikh Amin being the kind of student he was, there's a lot of points we'll get in our lessons that you won't find discussed in the introductory books of fiqh, right? We have a real kind of, for people who are maybe a little bit new, I'll mention this, we have a real unique situation in terms of our book, our lessons, right? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sayyida Tasneem, welcome. Great to see you, alhamdulillah, in the chat. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad. So as I was saying, we have these interesting cases because, it's hard to even kind of categorize what level we're on in this book, because, most of us who are studying this book, maybe it's our first book of fiqh that we're studying, or our second book of fiqh that we're studying. And so Sheikh Amin would address points that were relevant to the beginner, right? Alhamdulillah, no problem. Say the Tasneem, I can relate. Alhamdulillah, we have the YouTube link that I'll send out to the group, so you can catch what we've done so far, inshallah. But you have certain information, a certain detail that you would, or rather, the approach is one that would have you think this is sort of a beginning Maliki Fiqh class or text, but we have information in the book that you don't get in the introductory books. And that's because Dr. Dunya, in teaching this information to Sheikh Amin, used one of the high-level texts, Shar as-Saghir, right? Shar as-Saghir, which is a commentary on a Maliki Fiqh book by the same author, Sheikh Ahmed Dardir. He's the author of the book. He's also the author of a book called Aqrab al-Masalik. So Shar as-Saghir is a commentary on Aqrab al-Masalik, right? And he has another commentary, Shar al-Kabir, which is like a commentary on the Mukhtasar of Khalil. So this is all high-level stuff, right? In terms of the source material, but it's explained in a way that is meant for the beginner, right? So you don't really find too many opportunities to study with this kind of detail in English, But in any case, Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I'm going to read this point again. If the imam forgets a fard in the last rak'ah, let's say, for example, the imam forgot to say the second sujood. And really this wording is a little bit unclear. So let me say it. If the imam forgets to say the second sajda of the last rak'ah of the prayer, right? This is not really for instance, this is the specific fard of the second sajda in the last rak'ah, right? If the imam forgets to make the second sajda of the last rak'ah, right? And the imam says, Assalamu alaikum, wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then realizes immediately after saying that they missed the second sajda. This is a special case, because in this case, the imam doesn't need to stand up or go to any previous position to fix his mistake. If he missed the ruku and he doesn't remember until after he salams out, well, now he has to go back and redo the prayer from the ruku, redo that rakat from the ruku onward. If he missed the ruku in the first or second rak'ah of Maghrib, then he has to get up and make a whole new rakat to replace the rakat that's missing a fard, right? But in this case, he's missed the last sajda of the prayer in the last rakat. So he salamed out and then realized, oh, I made a mistake. This is a unique situation where he can go back and correct the mistake without having added anything of major significance to the prayer. So he doesn't have to make sujood saw after salams. He doesn't have to go back and redo the rak'ah or redo any of the positions or anything like that. He just says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And he realizes that he didn't do the second sajda. And so he sits in jalsa and he says, Allahu Akbar. And he makes a sajda and he says, Allahu Akbar. And he sits in jalsa again, the sitting position. And he says his atashahud and he salams out of the prayer, and the prayer is fine, right? And the prayer is fine. Perhaps if he's praying he's praying in front of people that he fears may feel uncomfortable because of the mistake, he can make a sujood saw after the salams and it won't hurt the prayer, right? He can make a sujood saw after the salams and it won't hurt the prayer. But now, what should you do as the follower if you came to the prayer late and you saw the imam made this mistake? He forgot the second sajda, the final sajda of the prayer, and he salamed out and then realized he made a mistake and then made the sajda and finished the prayer. In this case, the ma'moon stands up, finishes the rakats that he missed or that she missed, and at the end, she does not have to make sujood saw after salams, right? He or she does not have to make sujood saw after salams. You'll just finish your prayer as you normally would and salam out of the prayer with no sujood saw. Anybody need me to say that again in a different way? Don't be shy. I want to make sure you get it, inshallah. Okay, alhamdulillah. A couple people said one more time. If you come to the prayer late, let's say you come to Maghrib and you've missed the first rak'ah of Maghrib. You caught the second rak'ah, you caught the third rak'ah. And in the third rak'ah, the imam forgot to do the second sajda of the third rak'ah. So this is the final sajda of the prayer. Alhamdulillah, no problem. Somebody said they have to leave. Salaam alaikum. I'll send the link to the YouTube in the group so you can catch whatever you missed. But inshallah, we're going to probably close out in about 15, 20 minutes. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. But yeah, so let's say again, you come to the prayer late. The imam already made the first rak'ah. You join in the second rak'ah. You catch the second rak'ah. You catch the third rak'ah. And then at the end of the third rak'ah, the imam forgets to make the second sajda, the final sajda in the prayer. And he salams out of the prayer, right? In this situation, you do not, in this situation, you stand up. Okay, let me back up. You come to the prayer late, you missed the first rak'ah, You catch the second and the third rakat with the imam. In the third rakat, the imam forgets to make his second sujood, his final sajda. In the third rakat, he makes one sajda, then he sits in jalsa, and he says a tashahhud, and he says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And then he remembers, oh, I forgot to do my second sajda. And so he corrects his mistake on his own. He says, Allahu Akbar, makes the second sajda, says Allahu Akbar, sits in jalsa, and finishes the prayer, right? Because all he did was say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, but he didn't make any additional movements. And he didn't have to make any additional movements to fix his mistake. Why? Because he missed the last sajda. You don't have to go in any movements to fix that. You just, when he sat up, all he had to do was make the sajda, right? And salam out of the prayer. So what he added to the prayer was very little. All he added to the prayer was that before he said the second sajda of the final rak'ah, he mistakenly said Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah prematurely. That's all he added. That's not a big enough of a mistake that it requires you to make sujood salah after salams, right? So if you're the follower in the prayer and you catch the prayer and you find that the imam makes this mistake in the end of his prayer, what do? You stand up, you make the rakat that you missed, and then you finish the prayer as you normally would, and you don't need to make sujood salah after salams, right? However, let's say the imam didn't miss the second sajda. Let's say he missed ruku', right? He went straight from standing position to sajda. And then he realized, oh, I missed that. In that case, he would have to stand up and make the ruku' that he missed and make everything that came after that, which means he's now adding positions to the prayer. This is a big enough mistake that it requires you to make sujood salah after salams. So if you're the follower in the prayer and you see the imam makes a mistake like this, when he salams out, you stand up, you finish the rakat that you missed, that from before you made the prayer, and then after you salam out, you're gonna make sujood salah after salams to make up for the mistake that the imam made, right? You're gonna make sujood salah after salams just as the imam made sujood salah after salams. But if the mistake that the imam made was missing the last sajda in the last rakat, in that case, he doesn't need to make sujood salah after salams, and so you don't need to make sujood salah after salams. Follow me? Is that a little more clear? Somebody let me know. You need me to say it again? Okay, I'm going to assume that we got it. One more, okay. I say it one more time. If I am a follower in the prayer and I come join the prayer late, and the imam, let's say we're making maghrib, I join in the second rak'ah. I've missed the first rak'ah, right? The imam makes the second rak'ah, I make it with him. He makes the third rak'ah, I make it with him. But in that third rak'ah, he forgets to say sajda in the last rak'ah. So he forgets the final sajda of the prayer, right? Forgetting the final sajda in the last rak'ah is a special case because the imam can correct that mistake without having to do any additional motions that would add to the prayer. If the imam forgets to make the second sajda, he makes the first sajda, he sits in jalsa, he says a tashahhud, he says Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, and then he realizes, oh man, I only made one sajda in that last rak'ah. No problem. He's already sitting in jalsa. So he just makes the intention that he's going to make the second sajda that he missed. He's going to say that second sajda. He's going to sit in jalsa. And when he finishes the prayer this time, he's going to say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And his prayer is good. He does not have to make sujood salah after salams. Normally, if you make a mistake, you miss a fard, you go back and correct it. And while you correct it, you're going to have all these extra movements that you made. But this is a special case where you don't have that problem. So if you're the follower in the prayer and you see that this is the mistake that the imam made, after he salams out, you stand up, make the rakat that you missed, and you finish your salat and you salam out. And you also don't have to make sujood salah after salams. I'm going to go ahead and move on But if it's not clear, let me know. Okay, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, hopefully that was clear for everybody. Okay, moving on. Bismillah. The ma'moon's advantages. The ma'moon's advantages. The advantages that the follower in the prayer, who's not the imam, receives as a result of being the follower. The ma'moon's advantages. If a ma'moon, a follower, someone who's not the imam in the prayer, if a ma'moon does something that will require a sujood, a saw, before or after salams, if he or she were alone praying as an individual, right? Since they are praying behind the imam, and the imam is responsible for the people praying behind him, then the ma'moon does not have to say sujood saw. What does this mean? Let's say you're praying behind the imam, and you make a mistake. The imam doesn't make the mistake, but you make the mistake. Out of forgetfulness, you don't intend to make a mistake. You don't intend not to follow the imam, but somehow you make a mistake. You don't have to make sujood saw as long as the imam's prayer is valid. Let's give a concrete example. Let's say you're praying behind the imam, and it's kind of hard to give a concrete example. Let's say you're praying behind the imam, and somehow the example that I wanted to give is actually not a good one. So I'll just leave it general in case, unless you all need a little bit more description. But if you're praying behind the imam and you make any kind of mistake in your own personal prayer, but the imam doesn't make that mistake, you don't have to worry about doing anything to correct that mistake, because praying behind the imam covers you, right? Praying behind the imam covers you. So you don't need to worry about, did I not say, the surah after Fatiha? That's not a great example, because if you're a ma'moon, you don't have to say a surah after Fatiha anyway, right? But you don't say as the follower, oh, did I add something to the prayer? Did I leave something out of the prayer? No, as long as you're praying behind the imam and the imam's prayer is valid, your prayer is valid too. And you do not need to make sujood saw after salams. I see someone type the question, but I'm going to wait and come to that in a moment, because I want to finish this page and then we'll come to questions. And the rest of the stuff in this lesson, I think, is pretty straightforward. The next section is on vomiting in salat. Vomiting, regurgitating, throwing up. Vomiting in salat. If the vomiting is uncontrollable, right? You don't intend to vomit, you don't want to vomit, but you can't help it. It's uncontrollable. And the vomit leaves no bad smell, the food is still pure, then the prayer is valid. What do they mean by this? What they mean really is, if some food gets lodged in your throat or something like that, and it comes out, right? Then your prayer is still valid. Your prayer is still valid. That doesn't count as a vomit that makes your prayer invalid, right? So you got a piece of chicken or something that somehow gets lodged in your throat, and you're in the prayer, and you cough it out, right? You look at it and you see, oh, this still, I can tell what this is. This was a piece of chicken, or this was a grape, or whatever it was that you went. It hasn't begun to break down and decompose in your body. It's still pure. It's still, you can still tell what it is. Then in that situation, it doesn't have a bad smell to it either, because once it starts to decompose, it has a bad smell. So you can tell by the smell and by the appearance that it hasn't started to process in your body. In that situation, the prayer is valid. The vomiting does not affect your prayer. However, if the vomit is not by force, if you make yourself vomit in the prayer, this invalidates the prayer, right? Now, if you have something stuck in your throat, that's a little bit different, but usually, generally speaking, that you would know that before you entered the prayer, right? You would take care of that. But to intentionally make yourself vomit invalidates the prayer. If you do it in the prayer, it invalidates the prayer. To swallow it, like if you vomit and it's vomit, and then afterwards you swallow it in the prayer, that invalidates the prayer. Why? Because you're not supposed to intentionally eat anything during the prayer. Now, if it's something that is comes out and it's intact, what do? You should take it out of your mouth and continue your prayer. or if it's something that you can easily swallow, you know, and it's not vomit, then it doesn't invalidate the prayer. But that's really from another lesson. We're talking about vomit. If you vomit and you intentionally swallow the vomit, it invalidates your prayer if that happens during a prayer. If you vomit, even if it's uncontrollable, but the vomit is the food has changed, right? It doesn't look like a piece of chicken or a grape or anything anymore. It looks like food that's begun to decompose in your body, or it has a bad smell. Any of these signs to show that it started to break down in your body, right? In that case, your prayer will be canceled, right? If it's uncontrollable, it's no sin on you. If your person is sick and they vomit uncontrollably in their prayer, right? It's no sin, right? They didn't have any control over it. And Allah doesn't hold us accountable for what we don't have control over. But you have to cut the prayer. The prayer becomes invalid. The next section is about saying Al-Fatiha incorrectly. And I'm going to go ahead and read this section as well, inshallah, before we end it. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Saying Al-Fatiha incorrectly. If you say less than half of Al-Fatiha aloud or silently incorrectly, then nothing is required. The prayer is valid. What do they mean by that? They mean if you are supposed to be praying a silent prayer and you start off, you say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, and then you realize, oh, I was supposed to be praying this prayer silently, and I've been praying it aloud. No problem. You continue the rest of it silently, and your prayer is valid. It's better if you start from the beginning and just redo the Fatiha in the correct manner. Aloud if it's supposed to be aloud, silent if it's supposed to be silent. But even if you didn't do that, your prayer would still be considered valid. Your prayer would still be considered valid. The other example, if a person was supposed to be praying aloud and they say the first 3 ayats of the Fatiha softly, inaudibly, where you can't hear it, silently, by accident, and then they remember it and they say the rest aloud, they say, the last 4 ayats aloud, then their prayer is valid. Again, the better thing to do would be to redo the whole thing in the proper way, silently if it's supposed to be silent, or aloud if it's supposed to be aloud. But as long as you do 4 ayat, the more than half of the ayats of Fatiha in that correct manner, then the prayer is valid. The second point, if more than half is done in the improper way, then this means you have missed or added a major sunnah. So saying Fatiha in every rakat of the prayer is a fard. Saying it out loud when it's supposed to be aloud is a major sunnah. Saying it silently when it's supposed to be silent is a major sunnah. And that should be corrected, right? Now, there's some different opinions about this, even in our book, right? There's some different opinions about this, because technically they say if a person is praying silently, is supposed to be praying silently, and they mistakenly pray the prayer aloud, it's not that big of a thing, right? It's not a big deal, right? You've added something small, and so you don't have to make sujood salah after salams. But if the prayer is out loud and you mistakenly pray silently, then that's considered to be a bigger error, and you should make sujood salah before salams. You make sujood salah before salams if you've said the prayer silently when it's supposed to be aloud. Why? Because you've omitted something. You've left out something. What did you leave out? You left out making the prayer audible. You said the Fatiha, but you left out making it audible. And so this is considered to be leaving something from the prayer. Leaving something from the prayer is bigger than adding something to the prayer. And so in this case, you're leaving something that is small, but it's big enough that it requires you to make sujood salah before salams. And so basically the takeaway from these first 2 points is that if you make a mistake regarding the audibility of Al-Fatiha just with 3 of the 7 ayats of the Fatiha, then your prayer is okay. It's no problem. But if you make that mistake with more than 3 ayats of the Fatiha, particularly if you say it silently when it's supposed to be aloud, you should make sujood salah before salams. The third point here is it is good if you remember in time to go back and say it properly. What does that mean? it's good if you remember in time to go back and say it properly. That means if you're praying the Fatiha and you realize that you've been praying it silently when it's supposed to be aloud, or vice versa, if you remember before you go into ruku', then you simply re-say it the proper way. If you're praying Salatul Maghrib, where you should be praying aloud, and you mistakenly pray and you say your Fatiha and you say the ayahs from Quran silently, and you remember before you go into ruku', then you just say the Fatiha and the ayahs from Quran aloud and go into ruku', and it's fine. And vice versa. If you're praying dua, which should be silent, and you start off Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, then you realize, oh, I'm supposed to be praying silently. No problem. Just stop where you are and say it silently, and you don't have to make sujood salah after salams for your prayer to be valid. And then the fourth point they give is if you say Al-Fatiha aloud instead of silent, nothing is required, because it is considered a very small thing. And that I already said that, right? If you say Al-Fatiha aloud when it's supposed to be silent, then nothing is required, meaning you don't have to make sujood salah after salams or anything like that, because it's considered a very small thing. The reverse, though, if you say the Fatiha silently when it's supposed to be aloud, it's considered to be a little bit bigger, and it requires you to make sujood salah before salams. Now, the last point we're going to mention here is concerning intention. We're going to mention 2 points, and we're going to close out and leave a few minutes for questions and answers, inshallah. Intention, bismillah. It must be, the intention for the prayer must be said or thought immediately before the salat, or in the case of sujood salah, immediately before sujood salah. What does that mean? And it actually goes on the same parentheses, it does not have to be spoken. So what do they mean by that? What they mean is when you get ready to make salat, you have to have the intention that you're going to make salat. And for a fard prayer, you need to have the intention that you're making the appropriate fard. So you can't go into the prayer thinking that you're praying Maghrib and say, Allahu Akbar, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and then halfway through the prayer realize, oh, I'm actually supposed to be making Isha. It doesn't work like that. You have to have the right intention for the prayer before you start the prayer. You have to know you're praying Maghrib and have the intention of praying Maghrib before you start your Maghrib. You have to know and have the intention for Isha before you start the Isha for your prayer to be valid. So before you start the prayer, you have to have the right intention. And it says here that the intention should be spoken or thought. But to say, I make my intentions to make 3 rakat for Salatul Maghrib, Niyat Salatul Maghrib. This, you hear sometimes people say these things before they start the prayer. That is actually, you should not do that. You should not do that. It does not invalidate the prayer. It does not invalidate the prayer. The prayer is still valid if you start the prayer by saying, I make my intentions to make Salatul Maghrib, Niyat Salatul Maghrib, Niyat Salatul Maghrib, Thalathatul Rakat. These are the different formulations of spoken intentions people make before they pray. You shouldn't do it because Sheikh Amin, from what I understand, this was not the habit of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So you should not do that. However, if a person does it, it doesn't invalidate the prayer. But the important thing is just that you have it in your heart, you have it in your mind before you begin the prayer, or when you begin the prayer, that you're making a fard prayer and that you're making the prayer that you should be making, whether it's Dhuhr or Asr or Maghrib. And then the last point under intention is, if you say or do something in between your intention and starting the action, then you must make a new intention. So this is a kind of fine point in the Maliki Madhab, that there shouldn't be anything between your intention and the starting of the prayer. You shouldn't make the intention to make the prayer and then, do something else and then make the prayer. No, as soon as you start the prayer, you should have the intention. Practically speaking, what this means is that, sometimes you'll find that people have du'as that they make in the beginning of the prayer, right? That you don't have to make, but that some people like to make. You may find a hadith or some of the books about prayer that talk about du'as that you can make, right? You should not do it between the intention and the salah. You can do it before you make the inward intention for the prayer that you're making, right? You shouldn't do it after you say the takbiratul ihram. Alhamdulillah, excuse me. Because in the Maliki Madhab, after you make your intention, you just say, after you say Allahu Akbar, you make your intention and you say Allahu Akbar, then you go straight into saying the Fatiha. Or you can say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem quietly if you want, and then say the Fatiha, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and so on. Right? But there shouldn't be anything between the intention for the prayer and the starting of the prayer. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we'll stop there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, Sister Danielle. So glad to see you in the class. We started at I don't know what time it is where you are right now. What is it? 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock. Wa alaikum salam. It's good to see you all. Yeah, sorry I'm joining late. I thought I could catch you.
No problem. You caught me. You caught us. Alhamdulillah. And we on YouTube too, so I'm gonna send a link out in case you want to check out what we did beforehand. But now, alhamdulillah, thank you for joining. I'm glad that you're here. Glad that you made it. Alhamdulillah. So we're gonna go ahead and answer a couple of questions, inshallah. I'll start with the question that I see, the questions that I see in the chat. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad. Someone asked if I'm a late follower in the prayer, meaning I'm a follower in the prayer. I'm not the imam, and I join the prayer late. I make the second and third rakah with the imam, and the imam forgets the final sajda in the last rakah, right? And he salams out in the first jalsa. Oh, I see Sister Tasneem has a hand up, so I'll let you ask the question, inshallah, how you want to ask it.
I was actually taking notes since we went through that 3 times. So the last time I was like, let me break it down so we can just copy the notes. It wasn't a question. It was just trying to help everyone else.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. So let me read it. This is my chance to examine your notes. That's awesome. Alhamdulillah. If the imam makes the second and third rakah, if you make the second and third rakah with the imam forgets the final sajda in the last rakah and salams out, right? After he makes the first sajda, right? Because I see how you got it here. You said salams out in the first jalsa. Basically, after the imam basically forgets to say the final sajda in the last rakah, right? And he remembers after he salams, right? He does not need to make sujood saw. He simply makes his intention to make the sajda that he missed. He makes that sajda, he sits back in jalsa, and he closes out the prayer. Why? Because simply saying Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah to the right one time is not a big enough action to require that you make sujood saw, right? So missing the final sajda in a rakah is kind of a special case where the imam can correct it without having to do any significant movements in the prayer that would require him to do sujood saw after salam. So you as the follower, if you see that, right, and you see that the imam missed the last sajda in the final rak'ah of the prayer, he said salam, then he said the sajda that he missed, and then he closed out the prayer, you also do not need to make sujood saw. You stand up, make what you missed in the prayer, right, what you missed because you came late, and then when you close out the prayer, you don't make any sujood saw, right? Even if you saw the imam made sujood saw, this is a point that I'll take this opportunity to make more clear. Why? Because the imam didn't need to make sujood saw for that. He could have made sujood saw simply so that the people praying behind him would be at ease. Because if you make sujood saw after salam, it doesn't hurt the prayer, it doesn't invalidate the prayer. So he may know, okay, this is a small mistake that doesn't require me to make sujood saw, but let me make it so that the people can feel at ease. Or he may not know. He may think that it is a big enough issue that it requires him to make sujood saw. No problem. Doesn't invalidate the prayer. But you know better. So when you have made up the rakat that you missed, or the first and second rakat, however many rakats that you missed, when you get to the end of the prayer and you salam out, you should not make sujood saw. Alhamdulillah. I see a nod, so that makes me feel like alhamdulillah, we good. Alhamdulillah. The second question I see, someone says, so if that happens, just stop and start again. So this is in reference to when we talked about the person who doesn't begin the prayer with the proper intention. This is a good question and a nuanced question. So let's say, for instance, you're supposed to be making Salatul Maghrib and you are thinking that you're supposed to be praying Salatul Asr. And so in your mind, you say to yourself, I'm praying Salatul Asr. And you say Allahu Akbar and you start to pray Asr. and then you realize, oh, I'm not in Asr, I'm in Maghrib. Yes, you stop, cut the prayer, and start again. In that case, you should actually salam out, right? From what I remember, that's a case where you salam out. If you lose your wudu or something, then you don't even salam out. You just leave the prayer, go make your wudu, return to the prayer. But in this case, you salam out. If I remember correctly, you salam out. And then after that, you restart your prayer with the proper intention to make Maghrib, right? Yeah, in that case, you would do a standing salam out, right? Because you're salaming out just to sort of signify that you're ending this prayer, leaving the prayer so that you can start a new one, right? But that I'm gonna double check that, because there's some cases where you salam out of the prayer and some cases where you don't have to make a salam. You just cut the prayer. I believe this is one of the cases where you should salam out of the prayer. But if you don't, it's not like a huge sin or anything like that. It's just better etiquette to salam before you end the prayer and restart a new prayer. But in a situation like that, you're thinking that you're making Salatul Asr, but you're supposed to be making Salatul Maghrib. Once you realize that you're making the wrong prayer, you cut the prayer and you restart the prayer. I'm going to give a little bit of advice. This is one, alhamdulillah, this is one of the reasons why I believe it's good to not verbalize your intention. We don't verbalize the intention because our understanding is that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, so we don't add anything to it. If a person does make a verbal intention, I'm making my intentions to make Salatul Maghrib before they start the prayer, it doesn't hurt anything, but it's better if you don't do it. And one of the things I found is that if you are in the habit of mechanically saying your intention before you start the prayer, it increases the chances of you misspeaking and then having some doubt about whether or not your intention was strong. If I start off my prayer knowing that I'm making Salatul Asr, I say, make my intention to make Salatul Dhuhr, I just misspoke. And now I say Allahu Akbar and I'm in the prayer, I may start to work, oh, I said Dhuhr and I really should have been praying Asr, right? It's not that you had the wrong intention, you just kind of misspoke, right? And so this can cause people to have trepidation about their intention in the prayer, right? So, this is another benefit of following the ruling that we make the intention in our heart and in our mind. You don't have to say, I'm making the intention to make Dhuhr, I'm making the intention to make Asr, but you know what you stood up to pray, right? You know what you stood up to pray, and unless you have some glaring problem where you realize, oh, I thought I was praying Asr and now I'm realizing that I'm supposed to be praying Maghrib. In that situation, you cut the prayer and restart. But when it's not something stark like that, you don't cut the prayer, because it doesn't have to be a formal statement of intention. It's just knowing what it is that you set out to pray when you started the prayer. Is that clear? Anybody need me to say that again or clarify it? Alhamdulillah. And I really wanted to, inshallah, I'm trying to do a better job of stopping, at a good time, but I'm gonna give a little bit more time for some more questions because I ran a little bit late. So inshallah ta'ala, anybody else have any more questions? I see Sister Tasneem's hand up. Bismillah.
Yes, alhamdulillah. So I was having a conversation earlier and the person mentioned that they were like, they basically had this understanding that being in this state of najis, like, keeps the malaika away from you. And I questioned it, like, well, where did that come from? And I said, my understanding is that they don't like bad smells, but, like, we've had conversations about incontinence, and when you have like a medical issue where you would normally require a ghusl, but in that state of the medical issue, you could just make make a stinja and make wudu, as opposed to having to make a full ghusl. So I guess my question really is there any truth to that, or are there any states of which basically you wouldn't be like putting yourself in a state of keeping the malaika away?
Right. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad. So from my understanding, there are different categories of angels. There are some angels that they don't leave you, like the angels that are writing your deeds. They don't leave you. They don't leave you when you are in a bad spiritual state. they may be writing that you are doing the things that, you know, are putting you in that state, right? And inshallah, the minute you stop and you make your tawbah, they're writing that you know, have made a tawbah. So there's certain angels, from what I understand, there's certain angels that don't leave you. There are some angels that may leave you or come to you depending on the state that you're in, right? So in terms of wudu, I don't know. I've never heard anybody say that when you're not in wudu, certain angels leave you, but it's recommended that we stay in wudu. So perhaps there are certain angels that stay with us when we make wudu. Allahu alam. We know that angels do come and leave sometimes depending on what we do, because it's a hadith where Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, people were talking bad about him, and he didn't say anything, and then finally he got upset and he started to defend himself, and then the Prophet ﷺ left, and he was concerned, and he went and asked the Prophet ﷺ what had happened, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, well, when you weren't saying anything and the people were talking bad about you, or the person was talking bad about you, the angels were defending you. But when you started to defend yourself, you started to come back and started to engage in the argument, right? For whatever reason, Allahu Alam, as to the specifics of why in that particular situation. But the Prophet ﷺ said that in that, if you know, the paraphrase from what I remember of the hadith, in that instance, those angels left him. So he himself, he also left, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Now, more to the point of your question, when a person is in junub, the major state of impurity, right? There's some indication, and I don't remember if the specific hadith, or if it's from hadith or from statements of the scholars, but there's some indication that, you know, some presences might leave you, because the Prophet ﷺ's habit was not to stay in that state, from what we gather from the hadith. Excuse me. So it's good if you can try to purify yourself from the state of junub, because there's certain things you can't do. You can't, like, for instance, if you don't have wudu, you can't touch the Quran, but you can recite the Quran, right? But in the state of junub, you're not going to be doing really any ibadah, right? In a formal sense, right? You know, perhaps you may make some kind of dua in your heart, right? And Allah is the one who hears the dua, right? But, you know, I even the word junub, I think it means something like distant, right? So in that is an indication that it's not a state you want to stay in, because certain angelic presences may not stay around you. And even more specifically, if a person engages in zina, a person engages in some kind of like fornication or adultery or something like that, according to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ informed us that when a person does that, their faith, their iman, actually leaves their body, right? And sort of stays away from them until they desist that action, right? So one of the reasons why we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us far from that is because only Allah knows if a person, when we're going to return to Allah, right? We don't ever want to be in a state where we don't have our iman. We don't want to ever be in a state where if we were to die in that state, we might not die as a believer. A'udhu billah, right? So, you know, if a person has done an action, then they should remember that Allah is most merciful and most forgiving, and that He's always ready to you know, to alhamdulillah, to accept our repentance, right? And ready to accept our repentance and forgive us. But if a person is feeling tempted to do something, they should remind themselves that, well, I don't want to put myself in a position where if I die in that position, I may die in a bad state, right? A'udhu billah. So this may be some of what the person had in mind when they said, oh, if they don't, you know, want to be in a certain situation, they don't want to be in a certain state because the angels may leave them. But that's not quite exactly true, because like you said, a person who has incontinence or something like that, that person is not somebody who the angels are going to flee from because of something that's not in their control. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I see someone asked a clarifying question. Alhamdulillah. It said, if you are behind on prayers during that day and you find an opportunity to pray, should you pray the prayer that is currently in, or pray in order of what is due that day? If you only have time for one, which do you prioritize? Alhamdulillah, that's a great question. And I don't mind answering these kind of questions, multiple times because I had to hear it multiple times. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So if you owe a prayer, right? You always pray the prayer that you owe before you pray the prayer that's in. Let's say, for instance, Salatul Maghrib just came in, but you owe Dhuhr and Asr. What do? You got to pray Dhuhr and Asr before you pray Maghrib. Let's say you miss Salatul Subh, right, which people also call Salatul Fajr, and Dhuhr and Asr. What do? You pray all three of those prayers before you pray Maghrib. The only time you don't have to pray the prayers that you missed before the prayer that's in is if you missed a day's worth of prayers or more. So if a person missed Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, and now we're on the next day's Dhuhr, then they can go ahead and pray the Dhuhr that's in, and then make up the prayers that they missed, whenever they have a chance to. But if a person has missed one prayer, two prayer, three prayers, four prayers, they have to pray those prayers before they make the prayer that's in, even if that means they're going to end up making the prayer that's in late. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Someone also asked a question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Should I type it or say?
Either one. I see someone type the direct message prayer, so I'll answer this one, and then you can either ask it or you can type it, whichever one you prefer.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah. Someone said, so this is a prayer where someone had a surgical procedure that makes it difficult for them to make their wudu in the normal way. Like they said, but specifically they can't reach one of their feet, right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. For every prayer. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Great question. I hope I can answer it. So a person had a surgical procedure, and as a result, they can't reach their left foot when making wudu, right? And so they asked, should they make a tayammum, and what should they do? If you have someone that can assist you, then ask that person to assist you. Like if you have a family member or something like that can wipe your foot for you, then ask them to do it, and your wudu is valid like regular. If you don't have that, right? If you don't have that, then I believe I have to go back in the books for this one because I believe if it's just the one part, subhanallah, I have to get back to you. I don't know if anybody else in the class remembers this lesson from Sheikh Amin, but I remember that there's certain times where if you miss just one part, you do everything else. That's what I remember. You do everything else, and I believe in that situation, if you can't wipe your foot, you don't have anybody to help you wipe your foot, then you do everything else, and your wudu is valid. I believe that's the answer, but I have to go double check. So I'm gonna copy this question so that I can go and inshallah, please come next week, and inshallah ta'ala, I will let you know for sure, inshallah ta'ala, if that's the answer. If you are in a situation where you have to make a tayammum, right? Then yes, you would have to make a tayammum before each prayer. So that was the person asked, should they make a tayammum? And if so, would they have to make it before each prayer? Whenever you are in a situation when you have to make a tayammum, either because you can't make wudu physically or you don't have access to water, then you make a tayammum and you make it before each prayer. The tayammum is only good for basically the prayer, right? For that one prayer. You can't make a tayammum once before Dhuhr and then make Asr with it. No, you make the tayammum before Dhuhr and then you make it again before Asr. But I believe in this situation, if you can make wudu over the rest of your body and you can't do it over the foot, I believe you just make wudu with all the parts that you can make it. But let me go back and double check that. And if anybody else, knows the answer, feel free to share it. But I want to go back and double check to get back to you next week, inshallah ta'ala. Yes, inshallah. I'll look into that. Alhamdulillah. Someone else had a question. I believe Sayyidah Asma.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I had a question. I meant to ask you a while ago, but when Sheikh Mahi was here, I was getting to the hotel, and I was traveling during Maghrib time. When I got upstairs, they were already doing wazifa, so I just joined in. Right after they did Isha.
Right.
It wasn't until I got home that I remembered that I didn't make Maghrib.
Right.
So I made Maghrib, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to make Isha over.
Great question. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So in that case, you don't have to make Isha over because you didn't intentionally leave the Maghrib, you just forgot. And if you forget that you made a prayer, then when you remember, you go back and make that prayer. But let's say a person in that situation said, I missed Maghrib, but I don't want to miss Wazifa, so I'm gonna sit and make the Wazifa, right? In that situation, they would have to make the Maghrib over and make the Isha over because they should not have intentionally put the Isha before the Maghrib. If you come and the people are making Wazifa and you didn't make Maghrib, then you got to make, if anybody who doesn't know, Wazifa is the dhikr that, Wazifa just is a term that people use for adhkar that they do on a regular basis, right? But particularly those who follow the Tijani Tariqah, as many of us in this particular class do, we have something we call a wazifa, which is a set of adhkar that we make once every 24 hours. And so often you'll find people will make it right after Maghrib, right? If they have a group to make it in. And recently, our Sheikh Mai, may Allah preserve him, was here. So we were making the wazifa, after Maghrib for those of us that were able to travel to where he was. So in a situation like that, if, you just forgot to make Maghrib, and you were rushing, you caught the wazifa, you made Isha, and then you realize, oh, I never made Maghrib. Then you would simply make the Maghrib and you're fine. But if a person intentionally left the Maghrib to make the wazifa, and this is, maybe they made a mistake, maybe they just didn't know, right? In that situation, they would have to make the Isha again after they made Maghrib because you have to put the prayer in the proper order. And I'll even answer a question that you didn't ask. Let's say, if I was in that situation and I made the wazifa and then we started making Isha, and halfway into the Isha, I realized, oh, I never made my Maghrib, I would cut my Isha and go make my Maghrib because making that fard prayer takes precedent over everything else, right? So in that situation, I would cut my Maghrib, cut the Isha because I just realized I remembered that I have to make Maghrib while I made the Isha. So that made my Isha invalid because I know I should be making Maghrib. So I would cut the Isha and I would go make Maghrib, right? And then I would come back and make Isha. And if I would try to make it quick enough to maybe be able to catch the last rak'ah of the Isha with the Sheikh, right? And then I would, if I missed it, then I would go back and make my Isha again after that. Is that clear? Say that, Asma. Is that clear? You're on mute. I don't know if you can give me a thumbs up. Mashallah. Say that, Asma. I'm hoping that that's clear. Inshallah. I don't want to move on until you tell me that's clear, but I'm thinking you might not be in a position to talk, so I'm gonna move on. But let me know if you need me to clarify that or say that again, inshallah. Sister Zainab, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just one last question, or maybe we can table this to next week, but could you go over maybe what instances would we actually cut prayers? Like, when is that something that we should be doing,
right?
Versus like when is, it's frowned upon. Right.
So one reason would be if you are in a prayer and you remember that you did not make the prayer before it. So if you're in Isha and you remember that you didn't make Maghrib, then you stop the Isha and you make your Maghrib. If you're in Asr and you remember that you didn't make Dhuhr, then you stop the Asr and make your Dhuhr. If you're in Maghrib and you remember you didn't make Asr, you stop the Maghrib and you make your Asr and return to your Maghrib. Once you're not held accountable for something when you forget it, but as soon as you remember it, you're held accountable for it. So if Allah puts the memory of the missed Maghrib in your mind while you're making Isha, now you're responsible for making that Maghrib in order for your Isha to be valid. If he don't put the memory in your mind until after you finish Isha, then alhamdulillah, you can just pray your Maghrib. All right. Now, in terms of, and some say that it's
Brother Habib, I heard it. I just couldn't. I don't know. I lost this page. I could hear you, but I couldn't find the page back.
No problem.
I'm challenged. Alhamdulillah, I heard you.
We all are. Allah make it easy. Alhamdulillah. But yeah, now some would say if you remember right after you made Isha that you missed Maghrib, that it would be good after you made Maghrib to replay Isha as a mustahab, as a recommended thing. But your Isha is valid because you didn't know that you omitted Maghrib when you made the Isha. You had forgotten about it. So one time that you would cut your prayer short in the middle of it is when you realize you didn't pray the prayer before it. Another time you will cut your prayer short is if there's some kind of emergency, like let's say you see the baby is about to touch the hot iron, you know. If you can grab the baby, right, without turning your back to the qibla, then you can grab the baby and you can keep your prayer, or grab the iron or whatever you got to do. But if it requires you to turn your back to the qibla, go to another room or something, you know, there's some kind of emergency that you have to attend to that requires you to break the prayer, to do so much movement that it would actually, you know, invalidate the prayer, then you cut your prayer. If you lost your wudu, you would stop your prayer and you would go make the wudu. But in that case, you wouldn't salam out or anything like that. You would just go make the wudu. The salaming out, like I said, I have to go back in the books to look to find the list of when you salam out versus when you just leave. I know if you lose your wudu, you don't salam out. You just go make the wudu. I know that if you forget, if you remember that you missed a prayer, you salam out in that situation. The emergency situation, you know, if it's an emergency like the baby's about to touch the iron, then you go get the baby. You don't wait to salam out so the baby burn itself. You know what I mean? Like that's called dururi. That's something that's a necessity, right? But generally speaking, if you find that you have to cut your prayer for, let's say, also the other example we gave, if you are making the prayer and you realize that you were making the wrong prayer, you set out to make Maghrib and then realize in the middle of Maghrib, oh, I was actually supposed to be making Isha. I don't know what I was thinking. You know, you can't just change your intention in the middle of the prayer. You have to cut the prayer. So that's another situation where you can salam out and then, you know, return to the prayer with the proper intention. I can't think of any other cases off the top of my head where you would cut your prayer. Alhamdulillah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop there because you know, I don't wanna keep us too long over the time. I want to try to keep it down to an hour and 15 like that. But alhamdulillah, I'm glad we stayed a little bit longer today because we were able to get through pretty much a page in the book, and we were able to answer some questions. So alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you. May Allah preserve you. May Allah forgive us. May Allah guide us. May Allah reward you for your intentions and your efforts to come and remember Allah first and foremost, and to learn about the deen, the far'ain. May Allah reward all of us for our efforts to learn this knowledge, implement this knowledge, and share this knowledge. May Allah make us successful in those endeavors. May Allah bless us to be among the people who have ilm al-nafiya, who have beneficial knowledge, and who actually implement what we know. May Allah give us tawfiq in this endeavor. May Allah forgive us for all of the times when we fall short. Bijay Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أرنا حقا حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن، ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل، ونعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل، ونعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق الناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum, Jamaat. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll see you all next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.